Hello and welcome to the first safe for work Prime Minister's questions of the new season, new footy season, new footballification season. Should be a humdinger today, I'm hoping, because there are so many things happening. There are so many things going on, and it's all quite mad. So at the moment, we've got Northern Ireland questions still going on. It's overran slightly, so you've got a few moments of me possibly chundering on when I possibly shouldn't. And what I'm going to do while that is happening is I'm going to have a look at your comments. Which one? Says Dave W. Eddie T says, Tories just published a list of schools at risk of MAC before PMQs. Yeah. Okay, Prime Minister's questions about to start. Right, here we go. Sound on.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by congratulating Serena Wiegman and the Lionesses for their fantastic performance
like
at the World Cup. We are all incredibly proud of them. Mr. Speaker, I also know the whole House will want to join me in sending condolences to the family, friends and colleagues of Sergeant Graham Saville. It is a testament to his bravery that he died in the line of duty and a terrible reminder of the work the police do every day to keep us safe. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Louis French. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Labour Party used to claim that it represents working class people. But Labour's ULEZ expansion to Greater London.
That's how you know. You just said it. Working class. Working class. ULEZ. Working class. What about the working class, hey? And the ULEZ.
Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's unacceptable for Londoners and those in surrounding counties to face this regressive and unacceptable tax? And will he do everything that he can to help?
And here's the representative of the working class.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend. It is disappointing that last week the Labour leader allowed the Labour mayor to introduce ULEZ.
Which was a Tory idea. Implementing a Tory policy. Implementing a Tory policy.
All I can say, Mr. Speaker, is while we focus on helping hard-working families, all he does is punish them.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Right, here we go. Welcome, Dad, Keir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in congratulating the Lionesses and his comments about Sergeant Saville? I think we all speak for the whole House when we speak on that subject. I'd also like to extend the warmest welcome to our new Labour member for Selby and Ainsty. He's already made history for the Labour Party by overturning the largest Tory majority ever in a by-election.
Go little mini Kia.
And I'd also welcome the honourable members for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Somerton and Frome. Mr. Speaker, the roof of Singlewell Primary School in Gravesend collapsed in May 2018.
Wow.
Thankfully, it happened at the weekend and no children were injured. The concrete ceiling was deemed dangerous and liable to collapse, and everyone knew the problem existed in other schools. Yet the Prime Minister decided to halve the budget for school maintenance just a couple of years later.
Not his fault, though. Not his fault.
Does he agree with his Education Secretary that he should be thanked for doing a good job?
Mr. Speaker, I know how concerned parents, children and teachers are, and I want to start by assuring them that the government is doing everything it can to fix this quickly.
Can be asked. Everything that can be asked doing. Look at this idiot. She's out of here.
No
She's so out of here. I don't think she wants to be. Mark my words.
And let me provide the House with an update on where we are. Of the 22,000 schools in England, the vast majority won't be affected. In fact, in two-thirds of inspections of suspected schools, RAC is not actually present. And to tackle the 1% of schools that have been affected so far, the 1%, we are assigning each of those schools a dedicated caseworker and providing extra funding to fix the problem. In the majority of cases, children will attend school as normal, and the mitigations take typically just days or weeks to complete. We will do everything we can to help parents, support teachers, and get children back to normal school life as quickly as possible.
Lies.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Wood Green Academy in Sandwell was on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. The head of the National Audit Office accuses him of taking a sticking plaster approach. The NAO report says
in 1989, no one died. I was thinking of that from day to day.
The person who ran the Department for Education says he is personally responsible. Now, on Monday, he leapt to his own defence, saying it's utterly wrong to blame him. So why does literally everyone else say it's his fault?
Utterly wrong to blame him.
Mr. Speaker, the professional advice from the technical experts on RAG has evolved over time, and indeed it is something that successive governments have dealt with, dating back to 1994, Mr. Speaker. Now, as new advice has come forward, the government has rightly
so you didn't know that RAG was only a temporary building solution back in the 50s.
He talked about school budgets and talked about
70 years
what
ago,
I had done, but let me just walk him through the facts of actually what that spending
60
review
years
did,
ago you
'cause he
knew,
brought it
50
up.
years ago you knew, 40 years ago you knew,
So
last year
like to hear
you
the
knew.
facts. Funding for school maintenance and rebuilding will average £2.6 billion a year over this Parliament as a result of that spending review, which represents a 20% increase on the years before. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, far from cutting budgets, as he alleges, the amount spent last year was the highest in a decade.
Oh, right, okay, we're going to play the old inflation game. It's more than ever before.
Mr. Speaker,
if you think about it, not too. He's just lying. Mr. Speaker,
make
make this man sit down. He's lying. He is a liar. He is an effing liar. He is lying.
With what had happened previously. And, Mr. Speaker, it is worth pointing out that during the parliamentary debates on that spending review, the Labour Party and him did not raise the issue of RAC one single time. So before he jumps on the next
crumbling schools, that was the problem.
Get his facts straight.
Oh, right, okay, because he didn't specifically mention the problem. Right.
Mr. Speaker, Carmel College in Darlington was on the Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. And on the one hand, we have him saying it's nothing to do with him. On the other side, we have the facts. And there's a simple way to clear this up. Why doesn't he commit to publish the requests from the Department of Education for the school rebuilding programme and what risks he was warned of before he turned them down?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman's now brought up twice.
We didn't mention the
Labour school rebuilding programme. He's now brought it up twice. So let's just look at that and look at the facts surrounding that. Because we do know the truth about that programme, Mr. Speaker, because the NAO, as he's called on, actually reviewed that programme later on. What did they find? They found that Labour's school rebuilding programme actually excluded 80% of schools.
How the hell is this Labour's fault? You've been in charge for 13 years! Oh my God! You've been in charge for 13 bloody years!
Wasting resources that have gone to schools.
Oh, you irredeemable bastard!
The worst bit is that
the worst bit is you.
Now he's talking about the physical condition of schools. That programme only allocated funds solely on the basis of ideology, with no regard whatsoever
ideology
to the physical condition of schools, Mr. Speaker.
What are you talking about? How is he doing this? Oi, Lindsay, wake up! Wake up! This guy's lying in Parliament! He is lying! I'll have no lying.
We don't want to start off with somebody leaving so early, because that's what's going to happen, Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they want more, so let me continue. Ferryhill School in County Durham was on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. The truth is, this crisis is the inevitable result of 13 years of cutting corners, botched jobs, sticking plaster politics. It's the sort of thing you expect from cowboy builders, saying that everyone else is wrong, everyone else is to blame,
Cowboy builders.
protesting they've done an
It's the
effing
cowboy
good
government.
job, even if the ceiling falls in. The difference, Mr. Speaker, is in this case, the cowboys are running the country.
Yeah.
Isn't he ashamed that after 13 years of Tory government, children are cowering under steel supports, stopping their classroom roof falling in?
Anymore. Just seriously, I will calm down. First session, I understand people are excited to be back at school, but we expect better behaviour. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the kind of political opportunism that we've come...
Political opportunism! Opportunism! The school's falling down on children, you bastard!
Before today, he's never
Opportunism!
once raised this issue with me across this dispatch box. It wasn't even worthy of a single...
How is it their fault they're not in charge?
Can I just say, we're going to have a calmer question times going forward. I want to hear the question, I want to hear the answers, just like your constituents, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
Lying little
before
shit.
today, he never once raised this issue with me in Parliament. It wasn't even worthy of a single mention in his so-called landmark speech on education this summer. And if we'd listened to him, our kids would have been off school and locked down for longer. It's as simple as that. He talks about 13 years. Well, let's see what happened when we came into office.
You're talking hypotheticals, they're not in power! Oh, yeah, it would have been worse with them. It would have been worse with them.
Premium to get more funding to the most disadvantaged pupils.
Jesus Christ, does anyone still believe a word that comes out of this horrible little blob's mouth?
As a result of our reforms,
Oh my God, you mountain of mad flesh.
Mr. Speaker, that's what 13 years of education reform gets you, all of which opposed by the party opposite.
How is it their fault?
Well, it claims to be a man of detail. There are 100 parliamentary questions from this side on this issue and an opposition day motion. But, Mr. Speaker, let us continue. Holy Family Catholic School in Bradford was on the Labour building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there too are in a crumbling school.
Mr. Holden, I think I've heard enough. No then, this is the last time you make your mind up. You either go now or you're quiet for the rest of us.
And, Mr. Speaker, if you can believe it, in April this year, the Education Secretary signed a contract for refurbishment of her offices. It's got her personal stamp of approval on it. It cost, I can't quite believe this, £34 million. Can he explain to parents whose children aren't at school this week why he thinks a blank cheque for his Tory minister's office is better use of taxpayers' money than stopping schools collapsing?
Mr. Speaker, what I'd say to parents is, in the receipt of new information, we have acted decisively to ensure the safety of children and minimise disruption to education as we have laid out and communicated
You asked about the office.
That is the right thing to do. And I would also gently point out to him, Mr. Speaker, whilst the Department for Education started this process 18 months ago in spring of last year, as far as I can tell, in Labour-run Wales, they still don't know which schools are affected, Mr. Speaker. But again, he brought up this issue of funding, Mr. Speaker.
This would have been worse if it was
to what happened in that spending review. Because in that spending review, I increased the Department for Education's capital budget by 25% to a record £7 billion, Mr. Speaker. It tripled the amount that we spend on children
million
with
pounds for an
special
office? Can you
education
answer
needs
the
and
question,
disabilities.
please?
It improved the
Can you answer the question, fucknut?
And it set the course for per-pupil funding to be the highest ever. But it also, Mr. Speaker, crucially, invested £5 billion to help our pupils recover the lost learning from COVID. £5 billion, Mr. Speaker.
What's it got to do with the crumbling schools? What's it got to do with your education minister spending 34 million of taxpayers' money on refurbishing their bloody pad?
I think he just doesn't get how this "it's all fine" out there is so at odds with the lived experience of millions of working people across this country.
Yeah, Nick and Dick.
And Mr. Speaker, let's go on. This is a long list. At least 6 schools in Essex were on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped them, and now children there are in crumbling schools. What he won't admit is the reason he cut these budgets, ignored the warnings, is quite simple. Just like he thought his tax rises were for other families to pay, he thinks his school cuts are for other families to endure. Doesn't it tell you everything you need to know? That he's happy to spend millions of taxpayers' money sprucing up Tory offices, billions to ensure there's no VAT on Tory school fees, but he won't lift a finger when it comes to protecting other people's schools, other people's safety, other people's children.
Yes. Ban the Tory schools.
Mr. Speaker, I know he comes here with these prepared scripts, but he hasn't listened to a single
prepared scripts.
A single fact of 6 questions about the record
you know what these questions are going to be in advance, you dickhead.
Schools, about the incredible reforms to education impacting the most disadvantaged children in our society, a record that we're rightly proud of. And yes, of course we can name the schools. That's because we are reacting to information and publishing that information, Mr. Speaker.
Well, these were schools that were on the list for Labour that were going to be sorted out in 2010 had Labour won the election. You won the election, your party won the election, and nothing was done. You absolute, monumental, shitty little pube of a man.
Across these dispatch boxes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Lefty
He
Voter.
talked about hard-working families across Britain, but what's happened? Energy bills down, Mr. Speaker. What's happened to inflation? Down.
Energy bills down. They're going up again this bloody winter. Inflation is still going up.
Mr. Speaker.
The bath is still filling full of water, just not as fast.
What's happened? It's gone up, Mr. Speaker.
What's gone up? My blood pressure. More money in the...
and time again to talk down the British economy, but people weren't listening, thankfully. His entire economic narrative has been demolished, and the Conservatives are getting on delivering for Britain.
Deliverance, crumbling schools, crumbling infrastructure, crumbling hospitals. Oh God, now we're going to have to put up with a Tory softball.
Inflation falling, energy bills coming down, growth up. People in the West Midlands are disappointed to see that Labour-run Birmingham City Council has gone bankrupt. As a Sandwell resident and a West Bromwich MP, I'm no stranger to Labour incompetence. Does the Prime Minister agree that Labour have demonstrated yet again that they always run out of other people's money?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is exactly right. We started by hearing how Labour in London are charging hard-working people with ULEZ. Now we're hearing about how Labour in Birmingham are failing hard-working people, losing control of taxpayers' money and driving their finances into the ground. They've bankrupted Birmingham, Mr. Speaker. We can't.
You've bankrupted the country. Our country has not grown significantly in our GDP since 2007.
The public needs no reminding that today marks a year since the Prime Minister's predecessor took office. And upon her speedy departure, they will have thought that things were going to get better. But when we look at unemployment figures, they're higher. When we look at food prices, they're higher. When we look at mortgage rates, they're higher. And economic growth is stagnant. So can I ask the Prime Minister, when is he going to get off his backside and do something about it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think what the honourable gentleman failed to point out is that the amount of times I've sat across...
Say delivering again!
...and heard how somehow we were a laggard when it comes to growth, Mr. Speaker. What he didn't do is take the opportunity to correct the record today, now that the figures have been published, which demonstrate, in fact, we had the fastest recovery out of any European economy after COVID.
Even Flynn! Mr. Speaker, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the Prime Minister thinks everything is all right. But let's look at his proposals for the winter when it comes to a cost of living package. Because when it comes to energy bills, his plan, of course, is to do nothing. When it comes to mortgage bills, his plan is to do nothing. And when it comes to food bills, his plan is to do nothing. So when the when the Secretary of State for Education said earlier this week that everyone was doing nothing, she was referring to the Prime Minister, wasn't she?
Mr. Speaker, I think he's a little bit out of practice, because when it comes to energy bills, what we have done is pay for around half of a typical family's energy bill over the past year. Support worth £1,500, Mr. Speaker, benefiting families in Scotland. He asks about mortgages, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor's Mortgage Charter covers 90% of the mortgage market and ensures that a typical mortgage holder can save hundreds of pounds a month when it comes to their mortgage refinancing.
All the people I know who have got mortgages who got caught out by this are spending up to £300 a month more because of your predecessor and her letters like bloody brain.
Something that he opposes. I will always do what's right for the people of Scotland, Mr. Speaker.
No, you won't. Well, give them a vote. Give them a vote for independence, then, you bastard.
Speaker, I was delighted when the Prime Minister last year said that on his watch we would not lose swathes of farmland to solar applications, instead rightly arguing for solar to be installed on rooftops. Yet my constituency sees a constant flow of planning applications for solar farms and battery storage.
What's wrong with solar farms? We need them. We need the energy, Greg Smith, you Conservative bastard from Buckingham. More money in that swear jar. Sorry, this is going to turn into not safe for work.
Now, solar is one of the cheapest forms of electricity generation.
They're just
so
the
it's right that
worst.
we try and see more of it
Look
across
at
the
it.
country.
We're in a climate crisis every day. We are seeing a new horror show going on somewhere in the world because the weather is out of control. Because the climate is out of control. Thanks to you and your piss-out mates in the oil industry.
Now, of course, we want to do more to encourage
Admiral Awesome, thank you very much.
and
Your
DEFRA will be
£2 is good for
updating
my
the House
blood
with further
pressure. This
information
isn't.
on that policy in due course.
Andrew Bridgen.
I feel for you.
The Prime Minister stated that he was proud of his furlough scheme. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if he's equally proud of the 400 billion he put on the national debt and the inflation it's caused. Was he proud of the jobs lost, businesses closed and lives crushed due to the lockdowns? Is he proud of the increased NHS waiting lists, premature deaths, and the 1 million young people now needing mental health support? And finally, Mr. Speaker, is he proud of the excess deaths affecting every one of our constituencies that nobody wants to talk about? And will he give an undertaking to the British public, a solemn undertaking that they will never be inflicted upon them ever again?
Is that Lawrence Fox's
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows, there is a formal inquiry regarding COVID which will examine all the decisions that were made, including lockdown and the impacts of them.
I think he was kicked out for being even too horrible for the Tories, and you see the front bench.
In the country, facing an unprecedented situation, that this government put its arms around the British public to ensure that we protected 10 million jobs. And as the report from the ONS showed last week, those actions combined with all the other things we did to support the economy ensured that we had the fastest recovery through the pandemic of any European nation.
No, we didn't! Stop lying!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a nation of animal lovers, the Conservatives' government record on animal welfare is a source of great pride. But sadly, too many abuses remain, from pet theft, the smuggling of puppies and heavily pregnant dogs, and dogs with their ears horrifically cropped, to the illegal export of horses to Europe for slaughter. These issues are personal to me as a veterinary surgeon and to my constituents, especially animal theft and livestock worrying. Can the Prime Minister reassure the House that animal welfare is a key government priority and that he will bring forward the necessary legislation to tackle these issues as soon as possible?
All these Tories getting to ask questions.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for both raising this issue but also his work and expertise in the area. I'm proud that thanks to the actions that previous governments have taken with regard to things like cat microchipping, the ivory ban, or indeed raising
While
the
he thunders on, let me just show you this. This is the GDP for the UK for 2007. Note it is nearly 3.1 trillion.
But we are determined to go even further and deliver
I'm going to go
on our manifesto commitments individually.
The figures for 2021. That's 3.1. It's hardly gone up anything, and it actually went down last year. It actually went down last year. Sick of this.
So can the Prime Minister explain how he was found to have breached the Code of Conduct, this time for failing to declare his wife's shares in a childcare agency, which received a monetary boost from measures in his budget?
Yep.
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable lady reads the full transcript and the full findings, she will see a detailed explanation of what happened, which the Commissioner described as a minor and inadvertent breach. But given that
minor and inadvertent breach,
I was not aware
like
of
his
the policy that was being discussed
£500
with me,
million
and
worth of
corrected it
emphasis
later on and could have
shows.
corrected it with slightly different language. She'll also know that I'm not the only person across these dispatch boxes that has had the same thing happen to them.
John Penrose.
Mr. Speaker, can I interest the Prime Minister in proposals from the Carbon Competitiveness Commission, which I chair, which would deliver net zero cheaply and without deindustrialising our economy? It would help British manufacturers facing imports from countries with lower energy costs, make our exports more competitive everywhere, and cut fuel duty here at home. We've strong backing from Britain's heavy industries, cross-party support from the
husband of Dido Harding, I believe,
also on the order paper.
and
So would the
he's
Prime
standing
Minister
there
consider
as a
adding his
shill
name
for the
to
oil
our list of
companies
supporters
saying,
as well?
can we come up with
I'm
ways
grateful to my
burn
honourable
as much
friend
oil
and
as
the
we
Commission
can
for
for the
Carbon
next few years, and we'll
Competitiveness
carbon
for the
capture
report
it
that
somehow
he's
using
worked
magic!
on and highlighted.
Using
The government
magic
is
powers,
absolutely
'cause it
committed to
doesn't
putting in
exist
place
in
the
real
necessary
life.
policies for UK industry to decarbonise successfully.
Thanks so much
As
for the
he'll be
£2
aware,
super chat
government
there when
recently
I'm
consulted on addressing
They are
carbon
so hateful,
leakage
they
in
really,
particular,
really are.
with a range of potential options. We're in the process of considering those responses and will issue
How
a
does this
formal
scam work?
response
Well, it's
in
probably
due
to
case.
do with the
In
fact that they'll
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
greenwashing. It'll be greenwashing.
Every year, billions of wet wipes go out into our rivers and oceans and clog up our sewers. Yeah. I've been campaigning on this for years to ban plastic in wet wipes, and the government has finally promised to ban plastic in wet wipes, but that was 5 months ago and there's been nothing since then. So will the Prime Minister today finally give a date when that ban will come into force and make a difference to our environment, or is this another broken promise from his zombie government?
Speaker, in the comprehensive plan for water that was published by the Environment Secretary in April, we did confirm
5 people
our
getting ill a
intention
day
to
for
ban
swimming in
wet
our
wipes,
waters these days.
containing plastic, subject, of course, as is legally
5 people
proper,
a day
subject to
getting
a
ill
public
from all sewage in our
consultation.
waters.
That consultation
Under
will be
your-
launched
under your watch,
in the
mate.
coming months in autumn of this year.
It's
and I
wrong
know
to blame
ministers
me.
will keep the
I'm
House
just the
updated
Prime
on
Minister. What can
progress.
I do about it?
I'd like to offer some assistance on the small boats issue. Has my right honourable friend considered the incongruity of the fact that a UK dinghy manufacturer tries to sell into the EU market would have to apply the CE marking, customs codes, and the potential of being stopped and checked. And similar applies perversely when a simple thing like GB to NI trade. But none of this applies, seemingly, when these huge, supersized, dangerous, cut-and-shut dinghies are taken in from Turkey across the EU border into Bulgaria and Greece. Is he as confused as I am by the EU's double standards on this matter?
We should have left the EU, they could have a say on it.
My honourable friend is absolutely right that we must do all we can to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration. And we know that the export of small boats across parts of the European continent is a vital element of the smuggling gang's tactics, and that's why, specifically, we are stepping up joint operations with Turkey, Mr. Speaker, and I raise this with the President
Turkey making boats, yeah,
so
right,
that we
mate.
can tackle organised immigration crime,
seriously,
and specifically
how stupid do they think we are? Oh, we're going to stop Turkey making boats. We're going to say to a private company in another country, oi, stop making boats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago in Plymouth, we lost 5 people in the worst mass shooting the country has seen for a decade. The government has finally consulted on firearms reform, but after pressure from shooting groups, even these sensible measures looks like they could be watered down.
Wow.
So will the Prime Minister bow down to lobbyists from the shooting industry, or will he stand with the grieving families and those in Plymouth who want to see no other tragedy like this ever happen again?
Agree.
With
That's
stronger
what I would do.
gun laws?
I don't care anymore. I don't.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know how important this issue is to the honourable gentleman following the horrific shooting in his constituency, and my thoughts are with the family of all those who were killed. He will know that firearms are subject to stringent controls, and rightly so, but those controls are kept under constant review. For example, we've taken action to improve information sharing between GPs and the police to make sure that people are not given access to firearms without their medical conditions being checked, and the statutory guidance for the chief officers of police have been improving.
He's
so
a
that
shill
how
for
people
the
apply for
firearms manufacturers
is,
as well,
is assessed
this guy.
properly,
So,
including checks
you know,
on social media. With regard to the matter he specifically raises, the Home Office is in the process of considering responses to that consultation and will respond in due course.
Stephen McFarlane.
I do it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Later today, Mr. Speaker, I'm bringing forward a 10-minute rule bill to include the provision of automated external defibrillators in all new housing developments of 10 dwellings or more. Will my right honourable friend therefore support this provision, and ask his relevant Cabinet colleagues to engage with me on to ensure these life-saving pieces of equipment can become commonplace where they can have the most impact close to people's homes.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right to highlight the importance of these life-saving devices, and that's why the National Planning Policy Framework already expects planning policies and decisions to promote public safety, but it's also why recently the government launched a £1 million fund which will place around 1,000 new defibrillators in communities across England to help improve equality of access to these life-saving devices.
Andy MacDonald.
That's probably the only Tory point I've heard all year where
Outwood Academy's Riverside Free School application in middle school was approved with its first year 7 intake arriving the following year, and that has happened every year since, but there's still no new building. I've had no response to my request for a meeting with the Secretary of State, but that original intake are destined to spend their entire secondary education in various temporary adapted premises. Mr. Speaker, with pupils being shunted around old buildings, talk of levelling up and addressing the GCSE attainment gap rings hollow. So can the Prime Minister and his Education Secretary get off their derrieres and sort this out?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to ensure that the honourable gentleman gets an answer to the specific question he raised on the school, but more generally, I'm proud of what the government's doing in Teesside and the Tees Valley to support education, with the recent announcement of new sixth forms, but also as an education improvement area receiving extra funding and resources, and that's why we've seen standards in reading and maths increase considerably, and we're determined to keep going.
Priti Patel.
Because the Prime Minister is aware of how the RAC issue has really affected schools in Essex. We've got a high number of schools that have been impacted, and he's rightly said today that the government's doing everything it can to get children back to school. Can he try to commit, and I know there's a debate later on today, to fully funding both the capital and revenue costs that are associated with getting children back into school? And I would hope that he would commit to meeting the leader of Essex County Council, because they are pioneering some great reforms right now where they're looking to support, maintain schools, as well as academy trusts. And I think actually the government could get some good insights in terms of how we can get children back to school fast, and also look at the funding model for this.
Can I first of all start by thanking my right honourable friend for the engagement constructively that she's had with the department, and indeed pay tribute to her school leaders and local authority for everything that they are doing. I am happy to give her the reassurance, as the Chancellor already said, new funding will be provided to schools to deal with this issue, but also to ensure that we can get through this as quickly as possible for
why the Tories have to
constituents
stop
and parents, and
the
indeed everyone's. DFE
well, you know,
it's increasing the number of
sort
dedicated caseworkers from
like
50 to 80. We have 35 project directors regionally on the ground to support, and we've increased the number of survey firms by more than double, Mr. Speaker, so that we can rapidly, over the next few weeks, fully assess all the relevant schools and have a mitigation plan in place.
Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Steelworkers in my Aberafon constituency have watched in frustration as other governments have pumped investment into decarbonisation, whilst successive Tory governments have sat on their hands.
Yes.
So when will the Prime Minister finally conclude the talks with Tata Steel, and can he guarantee that there will be a matching level of investment with what other European governments are doing on decarbonisation, and will he guarantee that the conclusion will be based on serious engagement comprehensively with the steel unions?
Well,
I agree,
Mr.
Simon.
Speaker, steel is absolutely vital to the UK. This is something that, of course, is of interest to the honourable gentleman, but something that I've also discussed extensively with my honourable friend from Scunthorpe, and that's because the industry supports local jobs and economic growth. Now, conversations with specific companies like Tata are ongoing, but they are understandably commercially sensitive. But we do share the ambition of securing a decarbonised, sustainable and competitive future for the industry in this country. And in the meantime, we are supporting the sector, Mr. Speaker, with our energy industries exemption, which provides discounted energy bills, and the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund, which supports steel companies with their energy bills and the transition through capital to a greener future.
Mark Fletcher.
Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago the government announced that the Bolsover Schools bid for a sixth form in my constituency has been successful. 52 2% of school leavers at 16 years old across the country go on to a sixth form. But in Bolsover, it's 23%, in Clown, 22%, and in Shirebrook, it's 7%. So will the Prime Minister join me in thanking the Red Hill Academy Trust, Matthew Hall, the head teacher of Bolsover School, and all of those who have helped to bring a sixth form to Bolsover?
Yeah. So Edward and Tubbs did have a child.
Congratulate Red Hill and everyone involved with the successful bid for the new sixth form in Bolsover. I'm delighted that the bid was successful because my honourable friend, I know, shares my desire to ensure a world-class education for every single one of our young people across the country, because that is the best way to provide them with the opportunity for a better life, and this new programme of sixth forms will deliver that in his constituency and many others across the nation.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the North East has been underfunded in terms of transport investment for decades. HS2, meant to be an economic development and connectivity lifeline, now not coming anywhere near. And the A1 Northumberland dualling decision delayed yet again, and our regional rail services still running on outdated infrastructure and rolling stock. With all that in mind, will the Prime Minister commit to funding to reopen the Leamside line from Gateshead to County Durham to take pressure off the East Coast main line and aid economic
This is exactly the sort of thing I want to see done. Take the pressure off the East Coast main line.
Absolutely. Just a rhetoric.
Yeah,
Mr.
take
Speaker,
the pressure
what
off
I would say
the two main lines.
And obviously it wouldn't be right for me to comment on specific projects, but to give him a sense of our commitment, what I can tell him is that in real terms, since 2010, we have spent over a third more in central capital investment in northern transport every single year since 2010 compared to Labour's last 6 years in government, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're doing for northern transportation, and specifically when it comes to reopening and restoring railway lines. Where was the first one we did? From Ashington to Blythe.
I have a cheerful question that I know my right honourable friend the Prime Minister will find impossible to resist, because he'll be aware of the work I've been doing with the number 10 UK Ambassador for Mental Health, Dr. Alex George, to establish early intervention mental health hubs across the country. Now, we've got the pilot, which seems lost somewhere between the Treasury and the Department of Health, but I know he'll sort that problem out. But I wonder if he will be able to meet with Dr. Alex George and myself to discuss it further, because these hubs will make a massive difference to constituencies across the country. Because we all know the problems with CAMS and the perverse situation where children and young people have to get progressively worse before they get the treatment they need. I know he'll be very supportive of this one, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know my honourable friend is rightly a passionate advocate for improving mental health support for young people, something that I know we are doing, and I'm proud of our record.
No, you're not. You're doing the absolute opposite. According to the news today, you're telling them to get back to work. That's what you're doing for young people who need mental health services right now. You're telling them to stop lounging about and get back to work.
To meet my honourable friend personally to discuss how we can push
this forward. That you control.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've heard far too much lately about ministerial posteriors and very little about prosperity for the country, even in these dying days of the lame duck government. Will the Prime Minister stop prevaricating and subscribe to the Horizon programme for the sake of vital British science, innovation and cancer research?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that is investing record sums in British science and research and development, because we believe that it's critical to a brighter economic future and spreading opportunity. Now, our priority and preference is to associate to Horizon, but we do want to make sure that that is on terms that are right, both for the British taxpayer and for British science and research. I can commit to her that we've been extensively involved in discussions. I hope to be able to conclude those successfully, and when we do, I hope she'll be the first to stand up and congratulate the government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, but it also marks 2 years since the death of my constituent Sophie Farrell. She was only 10 years old. Every day in the UK, Mr. Speaker, 10 young people will be diagnosed with cancer, and 2 of those will not survive. Those that do face a lifetime of side effects from treatments that are just not designed for small bodies. When will the Prime Minister publish a childhood cancer action
First of all, she doesn't care. Secondly, stands up.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this issue and extend my sympathies to her constituent and its family as she raised. She's right to continue campaigning in this important area. I hope she'll understand that I can't preempt the content specifically of the strategy, but I can tell her that it will draw on previous work, including submissions from childhood cancer charities and stakeholders to our recent calls for evidence. Of course, we want to hear from them to highlight and get a sense of the issues that she specifically raised. But I'll ensure that we write to her to give her a sense of timing.
Tory backbencher stands up and says,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every year, the SNP Scottish Government mitigates against the cruellest of Westminster policies by spending £84 million supporting hard-working families against the brutal bedroom tax and over £6.2 million covering the two-child benefit cap. Astonishingly, Mr. Speaker, we have learned over the summer the Leader of the Opposition is an enthusiastic supporter of these Tory cruel welfare policies, with U-turn after U-turn from the Labour Party.
This is Prime Minister's question.
So given that the Tories and Labour are two cheeks of the same arse, offering no change, no vision, no hope, does the Prime Minister agree that the only way Scottish voters can rid themselves of these...
Order. I'm not going to both stand up, so one of us is going to give way and it won't be me. Can I just say, let's think about language. Let's be more temperate and let's make sure that this Parliament can be proud. The pride of this Parliament will shine through, but certainly not using language.
So happy to change the offending word with bottom.
I think you meant language like that.
Given that the Tories and Labour are two cheeks of the same bottom, offering no change, no vision and no hope, does the Prime Minister agree that the only way for Scottish voters to rid themselves of these tedious policies is to vote SNP to leave Westminster forever?
Ask the Prime Minister a question. That was a bit of a waste. I normally like that guy, but that was a waste of
not,
question.
But I think the thrust of that question was directed at the Leader of the Opposition rather than me. Yeah, I won't want to get in the middle of that. But what I can say is we want a welfare system that is compassionate and looks after the most vulnerable in our society, while supporting those who can into work to do so, because that's also fair for everyone else and British taxpayers. I believe that is a system that we are achieving, Mr. Speaker, and right now we're providing thousands of pounds of support to help with energy bills and everything else to people in Scotland, and we will continue to do so.
Arse, but
that completes Prime Minister's questions.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Right, there you go. That's Prime Minister's questions over. Thank God for that. Jesus Christ, was that painful for you? Because that was seriously painful for me. I've forgotten just how much it makes my blood pressure just rise. Just these absolute bastards, these liars, shills for big oil, for big pharma, for big weapons manufacturers, for big tobacco, for the merchants of death. That's what these people work for. They work for the merchants of death, and then the people who work for them are the people at the Sun and the Mail, the Express. They're just the absolute worst. Groot says, "Can you stop screaming, please?" Okay, I'll calm down now. Oh, hang on. We've got a point of order coming in. So let's go into this. I'm just going to take it back a moment. It's a point of order from Lucy Powell here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, the Prime Minister in PMQs earlier said that my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, had never raised the issue of school building safety before, and he specifically mentioned his education speech earlier this summer. This is categorically untrue, and I wondered if the Prime Minister wanted to correct the record. He mentioned it as part of that speech, in fact. It has also been raised by the opposition more than 180 times in this House, and was the subject of an Opposition Day debate in the Leader of the Opposition's name in May. And I'm sure that the Prime Minister wouldn't want to give the wrong impression to the House, Mr. Speaker.
Massive lie.
Can I just say, first of all, you've raised the point of order quite correctly. You've actually corrected the record yourself, and I'm sure that the Prime Minister will be notified of the point that you have raised, and then we'll leave it for now, and we'll see what happens.
Stop being so bloody patronising.
Order. May I seek your guidance, Mr. Speaker, on how honourable members may be able to hold energy companies to account for their shortcomings?
Okay, we're gonna We're going to just leave that now. They're talking about energy companies and the fact that people are paying so much now for their energy. How much have I put in the swear jar? I don't know. There's quite a bit in there now. I put all your super chats are now in the swear jar. I'm sorry, that was quite stressful because you're listening to it. And obviously, you're trying to do a few things at once. I'm trying to broadcast. I'm trying to read your comments. I'm also looking at my phone, which has got like the updates coming from the BBC as well of what's going on, in case there's anything that I missed because I was too busy shouting. And this sort of thing of like the real time checking on the lies that are being told. Now, at some point in the future, now I think the Labour Party should do this, but at some point in the future, I think it would be really good if on Labour Social we had a real-time fact-checking I say unit, but like someone whose job it is, I can continue presenting and they can be like supplying me with the information that's actually refuting what the lies that the Prime Minister has come out with. Now, in that particular performance, when he stood up, I could say I think he's lying. I think this is bullshit. But what I couldn't do is actually what Lucy Powell just did then in Parliament and say these are the exact points when Keir Starmer mentioned the fact that the schools were crumbling and there was a problem with the concrete or whatever it was that specifically was a lie that the Prime Minister said. And I think that this is something that we should have. We should have this as a resource for people who are interested in politics who want to know if the Tories, when the Tories are lying and exactly what it is they're lying about. So, maybe in the future, if we grow this channel to a point where maybe I can have someone else on the phone at the same time who's actually giving me this information, who's looking it up online as it happens and has all the facts to hand, that would be great. But until that happens, I'm just going to take it as read, as that every other word that comes out of that slimy Sunak's horrible hole in his face that he calls his mouth, I'm just going to assume it's a lie. Because when he stood up in Parliament then, all he did was say it would have been worse under Labour. It would have been worse under Labour. It would have been worse under Labour. And the fact that Labour put this money aside to rebuild schools, and the fact that the Prime Minister had the audacity to say, "Oh, but that was putting what did he say? Ideology above what needed to be done." And it's like the project was handed to the Tories like midway through, right? So the money had been allocated, 55 billion, I think, had been allocated for this reason. The Tories then had that money allocated and they could have done anything with it in terms of rebuilding schools. So they could have looked at the plans and said, "Oh, we don't like this idea of having these open plan schools," which weren't a great idea. I'll be the first to admit that. I could have told you that one. But they could have looked at those plans and said, "No, we want to do it differently. Maybe we want to, instead of allowing regional councils to make decisions on building design, maybe we want to do a national version of it, whatever." The point is they didn't do anything like that. They simply scrapped the scheme. They scrapped the Building for the Future school scheme, and they took that £55 billion that was earmarked for that scheme, and they spent it on something else. What else they spent it on? Fuck knows. Like, I'm trying to think of another word that I can use apart from the F word here, but honestly, it is just F knows. Because they didn't spend it on infrastructure. They didn't spend it on our railways, did they? They didn't spend it on our roads, which are full of potholes. They didn't spend it on our motorways by the looks of things. Just that, I mean, maybe they put in some of these incredibly dangerous smart motorways, which I don't drive on. I drive now when I go back to Liverpool. I take a route that avoids the M62 because the M62 has been turned into a smart motorway for vast distances along the M62, and it's dangerous. It's just absolutely insanely dangerous. 4 lanes of traffic going at 70 miles an hour with massive trucks on it and no hard shoulder. Massive trucks going at 70 miles. Anyway, by the by. But they didn't spend it on defence because defence budgets have been cut. They didn't spend it on the NHS because the NHS budgets have been cut. They didn't spend it on just education in general. I mean, not talking about rebuilding schools necessarily, but just education, because we have seen the outcome of Tory cuts, austerity. They decided to save this money, make everyone, except for themselves and their immediate family, poorer, and live with it. Live with it. We've now had 16 years of no growth in our GDP. 16 years we've had, and 13 years of them have been under a Tory government. It's pathetic. It's beyond pathetic. Don't forget, 16 years after the end of World War II was 1961, and that was the beginning of the swinging 60s when things started, coming together a bit for the UK. Obviously, through that 1950s and Suez crisis, we sort of lumbered from one crisis to the next. But don't forget, just 10 years after that was when we joined, or 12 years after that was when we joined the what was then the EEC, which, if you look at the charts, if you look at our GDP, it just went from that point onwards. We started doing, it took a couple of years to bed in, but we were doing better. We were doing better in terms of trade and international, getting our stuff out there than we'd done for years. Than we'd done, because in the past we'd just gone into other countries and stolen things, and now we had to actually trade with people and treat them as equals. And we're like, oh, I don't want to do that. And okay, we'll go in for the EEC thing. We were told no twice by France. Don't forget, Charles de Gaulle didn't want Britain in the EEC because he said there'll be a nightmare. Which, to be fair, we probably were a bit of a nightmare. But and then you look at it, and you've got the credit crunch in 2007, 2008, and that's when things started going tits up. But the Labour government who were in charge at the time were getting the economy back on track. You look at the graph; it goes down obviously in 2008, but it starts going back up again, and there's a trajectory there that the Tories have just completely failed on because they took us out of the EU and imposed economic sanctions on ourselves. Anyway, right, look, the point being, the Tories had this money and it was up to them how they spent it, and they decided to spend it elsewhere. Rather than building schools, they decided to spend it on God knows what. Answers on a postcard to the usual address, the bin. Don Donovan says, so according to the Tories, falling bridges are kind of important, sort of, but falling houses with children, patients, and other humans in not so important, apparently. Yes. Yeah. And there's things in operation now for, well, first of all, there's children being taught in tents that I heard, I think in Essex or Kent or somewhere. And also hospitals are having to do drills in case the ceiling collapses. So where are you going to put the patients? Are they going to go to the hospital across the road? Is that how it's going to work? Victoria says, thanks, Graham. Shouting is how we feel. You can't make this lot up. Looking forward to the election. Oh my God. It'll just be like such a goddamn relief when this is over, when this absolute reign of terror that is the Tory party is over. But it's going to go on for a while yet. Got another year of this. Jesus wept. Biggest what if is what if Labour won in 2010. Well, Tim, the way that Rishi Sunak goes on, it's as though Labour did win in 2010, and whenever he's told asked a question about why they haven't done so, he said, well, Labour wouldn't have done it, or Labour would have been worse somehow. And you're like, and he talks about ideology. So, you're building for the future scheme that was based on ideology. Oh, really? Really, Tory party? What the hell is Brexit based on? Because it's not sound bloody economics, is it? It's not growing the economy, because it's certainly done the opposite of that. Anyway, right. I will return. Phil Morehouse will return in the morning at 9:30 for Morning Brew. So please join us for that. Thank you very much for your lovely comments and lovely super chats. Really, really appreciate that. And I'll be putting out another moment of truth later today when I'll be sticking one to our education secretary, Janine Keegan. And until then, I'll say thanks for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.